Hani, Sarah, thank you so much for your time with us today. Hani, I'll start with you. So you were a child in detention. Can you tell me about your journey to Australia and what that was like for you?
I think it was quite hard because leaving home wasn't easy, and also leaving your loved ones and parents. The most thing they want is like the kids to be safe. So for me, that is the main reason my parents, first of all, even thought of the idea of letting me to go, let alone being a young woman. But the journey is not the only journey that only me made it. It's like almost like more than like 100 unaccompanied minors on Christmas Island together when we were there. So it's a horror that we lived with, but as time goes, you heal and you're hungry for change.
Reflecting now as an adult, what was it like for you being a child in detention?
I think back home, you grow up before your time. So I think most of the time here, when you're 16, 17, everyone's it's still I know no one should ever be stolen their time to be a kid. But for us, we grow up with this was we've seen, and the time when you decide to leave, it's when all the doors have closed. So for you, it's you are the goats of the smugglers, So for you, you put it in the hands, your life into the hands of people, you don't think about if you get raped, you don't think about if, transport, is not available, you don't think about all that. All you think is, if I made it, I think something could change on my life. And then after that, you see the people around you, and all you see is face full of tears, and people who are younger, are sick, their rights as kids being denied in front of their parents. So I think that is what actually hurts me the most. Other than me, I knew that I was by myself, and I didn't have the responsibility. I had a responsibility to think about my family and if they're safe every time and how they were going. But I didn't have the responsibility to think about, oh, I brought these other 3 kids with me, and I'm seeing in front of me slowly they're dying, yeah. So I think that was my worst trauma. And then years later, you come, you settle, and then you reflect back on those traumas. So those traumas will always catch up with you, every few years. You're like, oh, did that happen? So you're always on a shock, I guess. But I always see life is full of hope and beauty, and things that happened to you in the past, even though it doesn't happen how you want it, doesn't determine how we feel our world and our expectation of change.
And Sarah, that's how you heard about Hani. You were actually representing a group of other children in detention. Can you tell me how your paths crossed?
Yeah, so Hani and I, had an unconventional start in that I was working with a group of the young boys that Hani has mentioned who are on Christmas Island, and working with them for a really long time, and working with quite a large number of them as well, and getting to know each of them as individuals. And they were telling me that there was, there's this girl in the camp that's not in their camp, but we need to make sure that she's okay too. And at that time I had no way of accessing Hani. There's, you have to know the person in detention in order to be able to speak with them. As a lawyer, you can't just call a detention centre and say, hey, I'm a lawyer, I'm with RACS. Is there anyone that might want some legal assistance? I'd love to take their call. It's just not how it works. And that's one of the crippling things about detention, is that you are so isolated and you need to know someone on the inside and the out in order for that connection to happen. And so I had heard about Hani through the boys, and I was also at that time preparing evidence for them and providing that to the Australian Human Rights Commission in support of their report about children in detention. And of course then continually heard about Hani and her situation. I think we got to chat on the phone a couple of times when speaking to the boys, but it really wasn't until Hani made it here in Sydney before we were able to fully, establish that relationship. But we had both, coexisted and crossed paths many times while she was still in detention.
What did the boys say that made you so curious about this person that you didn't really know about? Like, what was it that made her case so compelling?
I mean, firstly, Hani has reflected on that there are hundreds of people that arrived as unaccompanied children, which is absolutely the case. But unaccompanied female children or unaccompanied girls is significantly more rare than perhaps Hani is giving herself credit for. And so the fact that there was this young woman by herself in detention, and Hani's laughed that she was there for a year, and in comparison that was a good thing. Well, for me that's horrific that she spent 12 months in detention as a child. And so, hearing of her and hearing of her experience, of course, we wanted to be there to support her. Hani was also, making unique use of her time, drafting stories and newsletters for those in detention, of which were constantly shared with me. And so I knew that there was a really unique soul in that detention centre in the form of Hani. And so, really wanted to make sure that she was okay first and foremost, because we did have a program dedicated to unaccompanied children, but also just on a personal level, how inspiring that a young woman was in detention, not knowing what the future held for her, not knowing when she was going to be released, and trying to make it easier for everybody else in detention at that time. And I think that Hani does not give herself enough credit for what a leader she was, and for all the support that she gave others. I mean, she's just reflected now that one of the most traumatizing things for her in detention was seeing parents and their children. I would say that there would be lots of parents in those detention centres that would say what was really traumatising for us was seeing how unaccompanied children were treated. And that's just, really reflective of who Hani is. Hani was in detention at a time where people were getting transferred to PNG and Nauru.
Yeah.
And so, we look back and we go, in those 12 months, they were pretty horrific 12 months to be in detention in Australia, because at any given time there was 4 a.m. knocks on the door, people getting plucked out of camps, people getting marched onto planes, people getting sent to PNG and Nauru. And that was a really frightening time for, I think, everybody detained, living with that fear that, one, you were going to be on that flight, or two, people that you've now come to, have as your community getting put on that flight. And I think, we look back now in hindsight and think, we were petrified as to what would happen for the people that we were working with if they'd been sent to Nauru or PNG. And now we know in reality, what an utter tragedy that would have been for many, many more people had those flights continued to Nauru, because we know the utter consequence of our offshore processing policies, and we know that damage that's caused to so many lives. And I think that there's got to be an element of that reflection for those that perhaps didn't get sent to Nauru and PNG, that it could have been them. And I'm sure that that's a really heavy thing to carry for them as well.
Yeah. Your friendship really took off when you were out in the community. What's happened since then?
Oh, a lot has happened. A lot has happened. I think, that you come, firstly, like when you come out of like immigration detention, they put you on a community detention. So it's like, it's not just like you come out and you're like, see you, Seko, you're like, hello, there's a new people. So like, you come into another service providers, and the case still goes until like, then that is when that's when the real life starts. Because like you're on immigration, like community detention, you finish it, they give you a year visa. It's like a bridging visa. And that one, so like, everything like expires at the end of the year. So it's like your work expires, that the whole life is like on a piece of paper that can expire anytime. So that is when like, as Mr. Sarah was like, okay, it's time to like, get everyone together, like, the paperwork of doing like applying for the chef. I call it like 5 years of uncertainty too. But it was just like, all this hard work, but I think we did it, and there's always hope. Yeah.
There's been many bridging visas. There's been
6 months.
SHEV application, and then next year we'll do it all over again.
Yeah. It's like next year it's coming.
How does that feel, that that uncertainty for you?
I always have hope. Like I feel like it's like it's like the lack of planning, because it's like if if like, you know, as a person who live here, you want me to have a plan, like, you know, because in terms of like work, everything, you want me to follow like a certain way of like, you know, society, but also you put me into identity. So it's like you actually like undermining all the things that could make a person like, you know, as a part of like their rights to be, I guess, to live in a safe and harmonious life with their communities. So it's like for us, I think like, so every year like you counting it, you're like, okay, what is gonna happen? You know, am I gonna allow to see my family again? What is gonna, like, you know, every year you planning if it's your last, like, you know.
I think that what's so misunderstood in the community is that, you know, people look back and they see someone like Hani that's, you know, been in Australia now since 2013. So we're coming close to 10 years in Australia, but those 10 years have just been constantly hit with shifting goalposts. So, you know, Hani was in detention. We was like, when am I getting out of detention? When am I getting out of detention? 12 months after that, you know, out of detention. Then whilst in the community, it's on rolling bridging visas, having to reapply to remain lawful in the community. But when will I be able to apply then? So, you know, Hani wasn't able to apply until 2017 when the minister allowed her to make that application. And so then we had, you know, the next goalpost of, okay, I've applied for protection, but when will I get an interview? And so we have the constant shifting of goalposts. So for Hani, that was in 2018. So that's another year of waiting. Then we have that interview, and again, the goalpost is, when am I going to get a visa? Am I going to get a visa? For Hani, again, that was, you know, several months of waiting before an outcome in her case. And so now we have that visa, but still there's another goalpost in Hani's life, which is, I have to renew that visa. Am I going to get accepted? And even then, by reaching that goalpost, we're going to have another goalpost of another 5 years' time. Do we go through that process again?
Throughout this whole administrative process, you know, life goes on. What was your friendship like in between those years?
I think, you know, like, you know, having Sarah, I think like, you know, it's apart from like, you know, like the work, like, you know, and helping me to find my visa, it's like, you know, it's like having like, you know, when you're a woman and you have a woman role model, you know, it's like, you know, it's like having a big sister also in the case, or being like, okay, like, you know, having that determined, like, it's okay, I can like live in all these years of certainty, but when I make it, maybe like, you know, as a role model, like, you know, I can give back, like, you know, what I've learned in those, and, you know, and like, yeah, it's always fun, and we got to
We've had some fun.
Good stuff.
I think for me, what has been so special is that often as lawyers, we meet with people and we get to help them, and, you know, particularly with the cohort of TPVs and Chevs, you know, people are coming back to us after 5 years. On a personal level, I'm devastated that people need to come back to us, because I just so wish that I could have been able to give Hani a visa, or, you know, the many other people that we work with, I could have seen them off with their permanent visa and they never had to come back to my office again. You know, that would have been the ultimate goal. Selfishly, it's really nice to have people come back after 5 years and see what they've achieved and where they've gone. With Hani, it's been really nice to share those 5 years. You know, see Hani at high school, Hani get her first job, Hani at university. You know, seeing all those milestones is just incredibly moving. And I just, you know, I'm so proud of her, because the odds have just been perpetually stacked against Hani, perpetually stacked against her, from her home country to her journey, to then even being in Australia, having being detained as a child, to not knowing what will happen, to then, you know, being granted only temporary protection. You know, Hani should be in my office right now applying for citizenship and bringing her family to Australia. But the odds are so stacked against her. And so to be able to share those, you know, life moments of high school and university and jobs, and, you know, go and see her in her workplace and have dinner at the restaurant she works, you know, that's really, I'm really grateful for that, because, you know, it only gives me more drive to do more for that, for the community that needs us, because, you know, it's incredibly unfair.
Was there a specific time, you know, where you realised this friendship was more than just a lawyer-client relationship? Can you tell me a little bit more about, was there a specific time?
If it was like a different world, like, you know, I know that, like, you know, like, I could count on Sarah in any day, not only like who helped me with my applications, with migration and all that. But I guess like in advice, like in general advice for like as a person, as a sister. And I think like Sarah has like the biggest heart for everyone. And she doesn't leave you just there, like, she's not like, get your visa, see you later in 5 years. Like, it's like the constant, like, being able, like, sharing different other opportunities, making sure that, if we see this, okay, like, that, like, what do you call it? The circle, like, of life, I think, like, it will never go far. It will be, like, forever.
Yeah.
You stuck with me, mate.
Good. I think what's been really special about that circle that Hani has mentioned about our relationship is being able to formalise that relationship. When Hani came on as a RACS ambassador, that really meant that we were able to now, advocate together in a real official way. And I think that's what's been really special, to be able to share that with Hani, because she is a fierce and incredible leader in the Australian community. And so being able to go out and do that work together and speak to people about what is the experience of people seeking asylum, what it's like to be a refugee in Australia, has been something really nice, because Hani has, started as someone that I knew, became a client of RACS, and RACS will continue to support Hani, but also my friend and now my colleague, which is a really, really nice way to kind of come full circle.